been in the wrong position. This is the only opportunity we have got for putting a new community centre, as outlined by Councillor Mumford earlier, into a position within the community of Otton. Not only do we want a community centre, but I would also suggest that we have car parking for at least 40 cars, because there isn't going to be any off-road parking other than outside people's houses, that are one of the 190, and that's not going to please people. So I think this should be taken into consideration, and I think it would only be right for this council to take back this idea to the developer. I mean, I'd love to make it a proposal, but I know this type of thing isn't something you can do a proposal to. But we've got to start thinking of the residents and the impact on the local community. These people have been absolutely battered with what's gone on with the Sutton Road and the various developments. The least we can do is offer them something back.
Yeah, Councillor Mumford.
I won't repeat what I said earlier about building a community, but it will not work down in Langley Park Farm. It needs to be here. The first thing, please change the 106 from St Acre to Otton if we can. That's got the money. We've got the money. That's what we've been working on tonight. I accept that it's an indicative number. And I've been fighting that all the way through, where they've said the yield of a site. We do have quite an increase on this site from that was predicted. We also have extra open space, and I've worked with Councillor Harwood on this site, and they have done a fantastic job. But I don't want to stop things. I'm looking for concessions here. People sitting down and speaking. We've got an extra number of houses. We've got extra open space. We tonight have achieved moving money around where the money doesn't come into it. And I strongly believe that we shouldn't vote yes or no on this tonight. I think there's room there for us for a little bit of movement. And what I'm proposing, and I'd like to modify the proposal, is that we defer for one cycle. No? But then we've achieved the money for Otton, and we really haven't achieved the aim, and the aim was to get the community centre there. And now we are probably going to be forced to vote yes or no. And I would like to see some movement. What can be done? Because once we vote yes, there's no room for a community centre. And it'd be finished.
First of all, is that seconded? As for Councillor Powell, thank you. And then, did you want to speak to that now?
Yeah, sorry, just to
No, I'm sorry, the seconder must come first.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. No, it's exactly what I was saying earlier on. I said I think this is the only place where a community centre could be put in. And it is a need to the community after what's gone on with the devastation of Otton. The least we can do to the local community is to offer them this.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Admirably succinct. I'll bring you back in a minute. Councillor Harwood.
Sorry, if I can come back. Yeah, I mean, the big problem we've had is that we've had countless meetings over this site, and this is the first time I've ever heard anything about putting and we've got a design-led approach. Where is it going to go? Is it going to go into the buffer of the ancient woodland, which complies with the MPPF, which was hard won? Is it going to go with the Sudses, going down the central of the site? And also, this is only a relatively small development in the greater scale of things. It's the smallest development taking place in the Sutton Road. Of all those developments that are going on, this is the smallest one, the one of the highest quality, and yet we're saying now, eat into this with car parking and a hall and so on, which this development doesn't yield enough development to support. I think the way to overcome this is what we initially had said, is the flexibility within the Section 106 so that we can discuss in the round all of these sites, the yield of money that's coming out of all of the sites. We can look at the land that's in the area, and I think there are other ways to skin a cat, and I think that's how we're going to get there. So
Okay, that might work. Councillors Mumford and Powell, are you willing to adopt that alternative approach?
I'd like the planners to come in and speak now.
Of course, that does make sense. Mr. Bailey, first of all.
I'll let the case officer come back on that particular point. But what I did want to say is that in terms of all this discussion, I agree in terms of Councillor Harwood, but I've got to take members back to what the policy says, because the policy comes back from an evidence base. In order to substantiate an on-site provision, there has to be an evidence base to say there is a need for that on-site provision. I take you back to the wording of the policy. The policy, unlike Land East of Hermitage Lane, which does require that kind of provision, this policy, H17, does not set within its parameters an on-site provision for a community facility. I can understand the concerns that members are raising, and I'm sure the case officer will address that particular point, but there isn't a requirement on this policy provision to seek that on-site provision. And I'd also refer you to the other resolutions that were previously made which didn't require that provision, and also in terms of the appeal for non-determination, which also does not require. Again, I point to the issue of consistency, the importance that members are making the decisions so we're coming up with consistent decisions. Appreciate each application on its merits, but consistency is key for the reasons I previously set out. And I'll hand you over to the officer to deal with that other point.
Well, I think actually Mr. Bailey's probably answered the question as fully as I could, but I would also suggest that perhaps the way forward following the decisions already made this evening is to include discussions of financial contributions for community facilities within the Section 106 process, and for that to be subject to the involvement of political spokesmen prior to the resolution of those Section 106 agreements. So we're being consistent, we're recognising the need. There are policy constraints which have been outlined, but we're trying to accommodate that requirement, and that's, I think, the best way to do it.
It does leave us with a wider issue which we're going to have to address in autumn as to where, doesn't it? But Councillor Mumford.
If that's included, I'll withdraw.
Okay, thank you. Right, before we go on, I am terribly sorry. I had hoped that I strongly hope that we will get to the other two applications this evening. It's just about possible that I think we will get on to Barty Farm, just about, Barty House, but I think we'll be struggling to do BSD Football Club this evening, so there's no point for anyone remaining here for that application any longer. I sincerely apologise, but we are not going to get to that. So anyone here for application 15, page 227, I fear it will be taken at the adjourned meeting next week. Now, on with this discussion.
Chair, do you want me to just give them what the tests are?
Yes, please.
If I just, sorry, if I may, I wasn't, when I was looking at my phone, it wasn't a case of trying to do something odd about it. I just wanted to have a look at what the planning tests were, so that you're aware. Planning obligations may only constitute a reason for granting planning permission if they meet the tests that they are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly relate to the development, and fairly and reasonably relate in scale and kind. So the officers, I think, are correct that to ask for a community facility would not meet the tests.
Yes, I think the members had already, but thank you very much. Councillor Borton, I had you down as wanting to come back, did you? In that case, I think all that is on the table now is the slightly amended original proposition. But before I conclude that, Councillor Cox.
I'm hearing that Councillors Mumford and Powell are erring that they will sort of withdraw with their deferral. And if we can take this on board and look at the 106, I really want to round this off by saying it's similar to the need for a doctor's surgery in one place. This is all to do with the accumulative need. We are hearing from the parish council saying they need to have a space to link a community. We've heard from Councillor Mumford the same thing. We've got to either find space to spend this money appropriately. I fully understand that it doesn't comply with the SIL requirements, but I think we've got to look almost holistically and say, we need something, where do we put it? I can see what Councillor Harwood has said, this is a good design, and I can't see a place, you'd have to cut something out, and that would spoil it. So we do need to take this forward. I'm happy that political spokespersons are going to look at this, but I think we need to look as a borough as to, with all these people, not just this, we need to look about open space for everybody, not just on this one site. We may need to have a new park in Maidstone. We may need to have new community facilities included, but not on the merits of just individual sites looking at that. Contribution towards everything.
I would agree, Councillor Cox, that we owe a responsibility to Otham to assist them with finding an actual site as well as the money. We really do. And we must try and facilitate that process in as far as we can. Mr. Jarman.
Yeah, I'm not against speaking to the developers about an off-site contribution. But I would remind members, as Mr. Bailey pointed out earlier, we've tried to plan for this southeast extension, and rightly or wrongly, and it's been provided, as I understand it, or certainly the shell, as part of the two-form entry primary school on the Taylor Wimpey land. That's supposed to be used as a community centre in addition. So going back to one of Councillor Harwood's points, and it's the third of Russell's tests, you know, we have to be proportional about these things. We can't ask for every single development to provide a community centre. And lastly, going back to Mr. Bailey's point about consistency, the fact is we've been inconsistent because, for instance, on the Jones Homes development, we didn't ask for a community centre. So.
Which just reinforces the point that Councillor Cox was just making. And I take your point, but nevertheless, we do need to engage holistically. Having said that, we have now more or less reached the end, I think, of the discussion on this particular application. Were you in? Yes. Sorry, I got distracted there. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you. Mr. Jarman, I just want to come back on this. I want to make a statement about, or just talk about this air quality thing, just for the last time. That's it. So you assured me that this South East development plan had taken into account the cumulative impacts of the air quality. So it won't have taken into account this 30% uplift on this development. So if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere else, on any other development, potentially. And I'm not being flippant here, but my concern is, you know, is it going to be design-led air pollution that's going to take people to a health centre that might or might not be built? Because the whole thing is ridiculous. You know, how can we be confident that what we're saying is correct when we're saying that this uplift is acceptable?
Well, I'm not going to repeat myself in terms of what happened at the examination, but as I said earlier, and I think you're agreeing to this, Councillor Prendergast, the main reason for the potential worsening of air quality is due to traffic flows. There's been transport assessments with each of the applications, and they all talk to each other. Therefore, I'm saying we've looked at the cumulative impact of increased traffic flows. As I said earlier, I think the main difference between us is that, and I agree with the inspector, is that I think something can be done about it. By improving the Wheatsheaf Junction, by improving the Wellington Street Junction, by promoting modal shift, I'm trying to be proactive and actually reduce traffic flows.
Thank you very much. Right. A motion has been proposed and seconded. Is everyone clear on what that was? No. Please.
Okay, my understanding is it's as per the previous application. So we are looking at financial contributions to community facilities in Ottam as part of the 106. We are omitting the cascade proposed in the joint protocol with KCC. We will consult with the political spokespeople regarding the content of the Section 106, and KCC will not be a party to the 106.
Thank you, that's very clear. Conditions. And yes?
If I may, also there was just the issue which Rob raised as regards to clarification as to conditions, so that the conditions were material. I think it was materials and I think landscaping you wanted.
We've talked a lot about the quality of this scheme. All I'm saying is let's encapsulate that in the relevant conditions.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. But what we're saying is yes, it's very. The indicative schemes we've shown are very good, but they're not in the conditions. So let's put them in the conditions. Right, Councillor Mumford.
In that proposal, have you removed the money that is being allocated to Seneca? Is this the one?
It didn't specifically refer to Seneca in the original report, so we can't take it out because it wasn't there. But if you see what I mean. But yes. Okay. That's it. Right, those in favour of the recommendation as proposed, please indicate.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Fuck, it's going to fall. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Abstentions, please. Thank you. Now what do we do? Well, as that motion has failed, does anyone wish to propose an alternative? As there is no proposal on the table. Presumably, as that's been voted down, members have something else in mind. Councillor Cox? Sorry, Councillor Clark, did you have an alternative suggestion? Apparently, I just wondered whether he had anything else in mind as he had an abstention. Is anyone else? Okay, currently that means that... bear with me. Sorry, were you indicating, Councillor Bolton?
I'm indicating with a question. If Councillor Clark's got a proposal, I'll go to him first, because mine's a question rather than a proposal.
I was just going to suggest that maybe we come back to our original proposal, deferring for one cycle.
It has been explained. Once you it cannot be deferred again. It can't. And I thought it was fairly clear that members understood that once an application has been deferred and it comes back to committee, the rules very clearly state it can't be deferred again. So it will be open for members to make an alternative proposal to approve on different grounds or to refuse it if grounds exist. I'm struggling to find grounds for refusal. Councillor Bolton.
I've just got a question with regards to conflicting Section 106 agreements between the outline permission granted earlier in the evening and the full application that we've got in front of us at the moment. I made my views clear on the reasons I voted against the Section 106 agreements in the outline permission beforehand. Look, we're councillors, we're not planning officers at the end of the day, or legal officers, but what's the consequence if we were to approve something that had a different Section 106 agreement for the full application when compared to its outline application when both applications are live? What's sort of the consequences for the council if that situation were to happen? Because I'll be honest, I've never been in this situation before and I don't know.
It would depend on how great the difference was and what the difference was, wouldn't it?
I'm just going to clarify that point. Remember, the decision you took earlier was, had you been able to determine the application, you would have approved it. So you weren't agreeing to a Section 106 at that particular time. That Section 106 is open for the discussion, and what you've given was delegated powers to the head of planning to negotiate on that. So there would be no difference. If you were to approve tonight, you've got the heads of terms on that. There have been work on that Section 106 which has been progressing for the last 14 months. And that is very close. So obviously you're going to remove KCC, you're going to remove that rider, you've got the heads here. You wouldn't be in that difficult position because you haven't proved anything yet. You've got, this is what you're approving now, assuming or not, assuming that's where members take you forward. So,
I mean, look, in effect, the reason I voted against the motion that was put forward just now was the same reason I voted against the other two applications earlier tonight, was the cascade, in effect. And I'd be happy to, and I'd be happy if that was put back in to potentially consider moving it. But I think Councillor Powell wants to speak first.
I'm going back to my consistency argument. I hate to, really push this point, members. You've had two decisions. One recommendation, obviously, which had you been able to determine it, you've removed that cascade from our negotiations on the 106. You've had a Sutton Road decision where you've removed that cascade and removed KCC being the signatory. It would be, to my mind, unfathomable how you could then impose that cascade and KCC back into the agreement on this scheme when you've just done something totally different on the other agreements. It would be totally unreasonable, in my view. So I don't think you could do that.
Councillor Prendergast.
Okay. I'd like to move that we refuse this application on the grounds of overdevelopment against the policy in the emerging Maidstone Borough local plan, on the basis of the objection from Kent Highways on the impacts of the cumulative traffic impacts, and on the impacts on air quality in Maidstone at the Wheatshift Junction.
What I would propose, if that's what members are putting forward, I haven't seen or heard any policies that are being referred to in that particular issue. So what I'm trying to do is get very clear and concise grounds that members, first of all, we need to take this quite slowly. I need very clear, concise grounds that members are proposing to put this recommendation forward. I need policies that are going to be referred to on that basis. And then what we will do is, when members have given that information to us, then what I would request is there is a slight deferment while I have a discussion and Mr Jarman has a discussion with the legal officer, and then we can then progress matters from there. So if we could start to have those grounds and the policies, please, very clearly set out.
Before we do that, I'm terribly sorry. I had anticipated that this would be more straightforward. We are not going to be doing Barty House this evening. I do apologise, Councillor Springett. I thought we were just about... I am sorry, but I would not want you to stay any longer when it is on Councillor Newton too. I do apologise. And you're about to say we need to decide whether to go on to 11 o'clock. Is that agreed? I am so sorry, gentlemen. I do apologise. Right. Is it agreed we carry on? Thank you. Right. Right. Were you going to second? Thank you. I think it's...
Sorry, can I just clarify a point here? I know we're talking about this, what seems to have got members a little bit vexed is the 190 versus the 250. But on the outline application, and I'm just looking at page 165 here, which is Appendix B to the report, it says the indicative scheme shows approximately 250 units. So the indicative scheme that was provided as part of the outline application was for 250 units. So it's not like, yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the policy says a minimum of 190. So we've already considered 250 units at the outline. So
I don't think you are missing a point, Mr. Fitzpatrick. The fact of the matter is that we have a situation where the indicative number has actually not gone up, where all the other issues have been considered either at the previous planning application or by the inspector who heard the examination in public. So I'm really, really struggling to find an argument. So I think, frankly, given the situation we're in, we're really going to have to think about this very seriously. Did you want to adjourn to discuss this? Or... Yeah. And yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, if members are going to make this argument, they do need to show how, what policies are infringed, what the impact is, and not simply assert, because, and additionally show what has changed since the previous decision. None of those things have been referred to. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we do need to actually have some evidence rather than assertions.
Sorry, at 165.
Yes, Councillor Harwood.
Because would it be possible to move a recommendation for approval along similar lines to those outlined before? However, we remove the wiggle room in terms of where community facilities are focused and state definitively that community facilities will be sought and provided within the Ottham area, so therefore they might go to Honey Lane or they might go to one of the other sites. But that is a different application than the generic Section 106 one. It is very specific to Ottham, therefore overcomes the Ottham Parish Council concerns and achieves, hopefully, as far as we can go in delivering upon the aspiration of local residents through the committee, but it is essentially a different recommendation.
Councillor Harwood, that is possible if it's duly seconded. And
well, I'll move that.
Councillor Mumford, and as that has been moved second, that becomes the amendment.
I've got a practical question on that scenario. Then, if we're not highlighting a particular site and we're asking for a contribution towards a community facility in the Ottham area, that community facility would then have to go through the usual planning permission process if it was a new structure, etc., and be judged as an entirely separate application wherever that would be. Okay.
Absolutely correct, Councillor Ball.
If I can come back, I'm the past master on this because every application for North Ward has a contribution towards the non-existent community facility, and we have several £1 million, I think, probably in the coffers now, and that is the approach. And in the end, we will find somewhere, and just like Otham will.
Members, I'm just trying to come up in terms of trying to address that issue. We did a community facility investigation on a site that Councillor Harwood knows, and I'm just thinking outside the box slightly. If we, on our Section 106 discussions, earmarked a certain level of that contribution to be used for investigative works for community provision in that locality, we could earmark a sum of money which will allow us to commission some independent consultant to go out and look at potential feasibility of the need, the best locations for community provisions in the locality, and that way members would have a clearly evidence-based material consideration to take that forward, as we've done in a site that Councillor Harwood knows in Springfield. So I would like to put that suggestion forward if that enables us to move a recommendation to come forward, that we could earmark specifically a sum of money to engage for community investigation provision in that locality. That would enable us to have the evidence base around the need issue coming forward. And that is a suggestion that we could put forward.
I mean, certainly, as the mover, if we are prescriptive in stating that, and I would just kind of say to members that we have added the flexibility into the Section 106 discussions on the other bigger sites on Sutton Road. So this is a meaningful amount of money that we're talking about. And as I say, with this kind of economic development type research, it can drive it forward as it has in North Ward. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Mumford.
And as I'm the seconder of this, I'd like to include on that that the ward member and, more importantly, the parish council are involved in that process.
I think that was enthusiastically received. All right, thank you very much. Okay, after some consultation, I'm told I'm actually in error, and that wasn't an amendment to a motion, but was actually technically the only motion on the table at this point. So, Council, so we move to the vote on that. No, falls. Councillor Harwood and Councillor Mumford's proposal is on the table. Both Councillor Borton.
Wasn't there a proposal from Councillors Prendergast and Butler first? I'm told that after consultation, it didn't actually have any grounds for refusal included in it. Therefore, it wasn't sort of actually is not technically valid. But so anyway, we can return to that if need be. All those, yes. Well, we can vote. That was what I was intending to do, but I was told by Democratic Services that I should do it this way instead, so I'm doing it this way instead. Those in favour of the motion on the table from Councillors Mumford and Harwood? Those against? Five. Okay, that motion is passed. Abstentions. Apologies. There must be two, surely. That's two abstentions. Two abstentions.
Thank you very much indeed. Is eventually passed. Thank you for your patience, members. I apologise to the members of the public and others who are here for the 2 applications we did not get to, but I do not think it's fair to go on to Barty House, a significant issue, when we've got 20 minutes left.